Hi, this is Jamie with GettinCraftyStampin.com, and you are beginning the class of Creative Paper Crafting 101. So I'm going to give you some great little tools and tips and techniques on creating wow projects. Now this is a basic class, but basic does not have to be boring. Here, a very simple basic card is sure to wow, has a black and white theme, very elegant, male or female, and I also have a gray one. Same kind of technique, very simple, very elegant, and again, not basic. So the secret to paper crafting, there's a lot of little tips and tools. Sometimes you can see the fibers on cards, and sometimes you can't. Much like a shirt that you would wear, your cardstock, here's an 8.5 by 11 piece of black cardstock, is going to have two sides. The outside is going to have a richer texture, and the inside is going to be flatter. Sometimes this is hard to see, and especially as you're a novice, or even some pros have a hard time seeing it. So I always like to recommend that you take your finger and lay it flat and pull it across. You don't need to do a lot of pressure. You should feel a lip. Here, the lip is going down. And so I like to actually tuck my card that way. It gives a flatter surface. That means this is the top of the cardstock. So we actually have two different kinds of paper cutters out there. We have the rotary, which is a handheld wheel that turns, and it has to have the blade where it actually touches. Stampin' Up! Offers a rotary attachment to their paper trimmer. And we have the blade cutter. The blade cutter has a very small little blade, and it actually creates a ripping sensation. It has to go into the groove and not onto the platform like before. And this cutter actually has a scoring blade. So there's a cutting blade and a scoring blade, and there's even blades that have patterns and shapes to them. I like both of them. I prefer when I'm doing just a solo card. I will use this because I like that it has the scoring blade as well as the cutting blade in the same track. I like rotaries because they leave less of an impression on the sides. So either way that you do it, whatever you're comfortable with, you're going to want to take your cardstock, and I always have a clean surface. I always have a graph paper underneath because it's actually great for lining up your projects. It's a great optical thing for you that you don't even realize is happening. So I will take my 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I'm going to take the one with the lip. I'm going to put the lip face down in the paper cutter. And lighter color equals lighter pressure. So my scoring blade, lighter color, is going to go to 5.5, and it's going to score across the 8.5 by 11. You don't need to push very hard. Really, that's all you need to do. You don't need to go back and forth, back and forth. And then I'm going to turn this here to 4.25. Now I'm actually going to get two cut and scored piece of cardstocks ready to make cards. I like to make two cards, put one in my drawer, and give one right away. So you should be able to see the scoring line right there. And now the blade is actually left a slight lip as well. Both lips are going inside. The texture is nicer on the outside, a little bit flatter and shinier on the inside. So I'm going to take and fold that there. And I'm going to put my paper cutter aside for a second. Another handy dandy tool you need is a bone folder. Bone folders are, yes, made of bone. There are plastic ones because I have a vegan friend that is really against the use of a bone. You don't have to use very much pressure. It really does crease it. I like to give another little tip and technique here, is I like to bone it from behind. Just a simple, you don't need to put a lot of pressure, and then flip it over. The reason being is that when you bone, sometimes you leave a little shiny impression on the side, and it just takes away from the card, and sometimes you can't see it, and sometimes you can. So when I flip it over, that's now gone. So then I'm going to take and stamp. We have two kinds of stamps. There's actually three. There's a polymer, which is clear, not my favorite kind of stamp. Then we have wood mount, and we have clear mount. So in order to place a clear mount, you would just let the vinyl cling to the surface with a clear mount block. It has little air bubbles, and it actually has a static cling. When this gets dirty from touching too much, either that or the rubber stamp, you're going to want to clean it. I like to clean it with dish soap because if it gets off grease, it gets off oils from your fingers. And the rubber mount on the wood-mounted stamps, they do not come off. So you are storing something that's much bigger, whereas I would be storing something much thinner with just the rubber. Both of them are high-mounted rubber. It's really nice, gives you a good impression. Okay, so there's a couple different kinds of papers. There's designer series paper, which is the pattern paper you'll see here. and there's cardstock and cardstock in neutrals. So you can actually stamp directly on a lighter colored pattern paper and create a really pretty image. Here it kind of looks like stars or snow falling, however you want to look at it. Or you can use that same pattern paper to frame an image. So here it's framing it and it's actually giving a similar effect, but this is more striking, I happen to think, because it's got a border. So we're going to create this black card here. In order to do so, we're going to take our stamp pad and we're going to flip it over and we're going to click it into place. Then we're actually going to move the cardstock base out of the way. You want a clean, flat surface to stamp. You usually want something underneath so that if you're stamping and the image goes off of the paper, it does not ruin your stamping surface. And also, you want to make sure there's no lines underneath of your paper or little bits of paper. So I like to keep a trash can nearby, and I throw my bits of paper as I'm crafting into it. So here, I've got my paper cut already to, it's actually going to be half of a half of a half. So this is actually a quarter of a sheet, and I actually cut it in half in order to create the image that we have here. It's less waste, and I actually have this cut so that it can go on the inside of the cardstock. We have several different adhesives. Adhesives are a great thing to have. I think you need several of them. There's liquid adhesive, but we also have our snail, which stands for Simple, Neat, Affordable Inline Adhesive. And you've seen all these. Ours are have a replacement cartridge, and people don't need as much as they think with this. So you literally want to do just a couple little dashes, and then I like to put my finger right on it. It actually holds it in place, and it helps me to track where I'm placing it. I cut the inside so that it was a 1/4 inch around each side, so it's a 1/2 inch smaller than the standard card, and so it gives it a nice little frame on the inside of a dark card. You don't need it with most cardstock, but you do need it when you have a dark base, especially if you're sending it without writing with gel pen or something like that on the inside. So then, put this aside. I'm going to stamp. I usually like to feel, and I'm going to do it, and I'm always going to stamp right on the top. So remember we talked about that lip. I feel for the lip, and I know exactly where it is, and the lip goes down. You don't want to see that lip. You don't want to stamp on that lip. The side looks better if you don't. So here I'm going to stamp my my wood mount, and I go across because you want to turn it around and you want to see the reflection. You actually want to see it wet. You don't want to push too hard. Our pads are very foamy and our rubber is very thick, so you don't actually need to get stamped too hard. If you do, you might stamp that border if you're not really careful. So again, I'm just going to go like that. Once it's wet, it's ready to stamp. I'm going to come straight down, and I'm going to do this. I might wiggle, which is like this, but not ever rock. You don't ever want to do a rocking motion, otherwise you will pick up those lines on the side. And there you go. You have a nice clean image, and it's really very pretty. This same technique, but when you're using a sentiment, I get asked this all the time. I want to hold it along the sides, and I want to be very careful not to wiggle. It's so easy to do because sentiments are narrow, and the stamp you're holding with it usually is narrow, and you're more inclined to just rock because you're not focusing. So here I'm going to pat very lightly. You don't, again, need to pat very hard. You will see if it's wet. If you don't see it wet, that means that you didn't get ink on it. You want to go in, you want to see that it's equally wet all the way across. Then you want to place it down, a wiggle, not a rock, and pull straight up. There you go. You have a nice, clean image. And so there's several different adhesives. We have the snail, which we'll be using for this card primarily. If you want to give something dimension, you can use our Stampin' Dimensionals. In order to use that, you would just remove the cover, and now this is sticky, and you can actually create it to pop up. The previous card I had laid it flat, but this one here I'm actually going to use dimensionals just to show you a difference. We also have mini glue dots, which work in a roll format, and it has little glue dots. So here my finger's not getting sticky, and it's holding the adhesive. So I'm going to take another one off, and I would put it in my little trash bin. It's kind of like on the cooking channel. You see that they have those little trash bins right there. And if you move it really quickly, you should be able to place it where you want. Again, one more. If it's a long project, you might want to put one in the middle just to help balance it, or on either side. These are very strong adhesives. You can do it this way as well, which is backwards. I like to do it the other way. It seems like it's less of a struggle for me, but you can do whatever works for you. So now I'm going to place that on here. Having the graph paper will help you to stamp straighter. You don't need it. It's not a requirement, but I enjoy it. It also helps you to line up your project to kind of see that you're going towards the middle. Some people are much more A-type than myself, and they like to actually measure it all out, and I don't really think that there's a need. But you'll do whatever suits you. And so then here I'll actually take snail across the back, little dashes. You don't need a lot. Just holding it flat, pulling it across, and maybe in the middle. Again, I'm going to put my finger on the adhesive. This helps me to not drop it and get it stuck to other surfaces or other cards. Bring this over, apply it to the middle as close as possible. Remember, nobody should be measuring this and getting all worried. It's not necessary. And sometimes I cut my cardstock off just a smidge. You can see here, cutting it with that blade can cause a little bit of a ripping sensation. So what I do is I open up my cardstock, I turn it over, and I use really good paper snips. So the paper snips are awesome. They're a sharp bladed scissor. You do not want to take it to a professional sharpener unless you warn them that there is a fine tip on the end. That tip actually is great. Paper snips are so strong and precision cut that they will actually cut through slight pieces of metal, wood, plastic. I have cut through so much. I like that they have a little handy dandy nib on the top. I actually keep these in my purse because I have a lot of kids. You never know what you might need to cut off of something or somebody. So here I'm ready to go. I'm going to flip this over. Now I have a guide. I will actually trim from behind to create my perfect front. So here I now have a very simple and elegant card that was easy to create. Now, creating this is a perfect card for so many reasons. It's easy to ship because there's no embellishments. When you have an embellished card like this card here, you're going to want to either mail it by flipping the cardstock over. So now the embellishments will not be messed up in the mail system. Or you want to stick a piece of cardstock across the front when you put it in the envelope. Again, it's just guiding so that the machines don't rip up your envelope or your embellishments. By doing that, you're going to protect it a little bit better. Another handy dandy tip I like to give is once your project is done, flip your card over. Take the edge of your bone and roll it across. What I'm doing is I'm securing that the adhesive is getting a good hold from behind, and it's not scratching across my stamped or embellished surface. So it's just going to assure that my project's going to have a better hold and longer longevity, a longer life. I hope that this helps you. We'll be doing some other fun techniques next week, and look forward to it. Please recommend this class to your family and friends. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, so with our stamp pads, you can actually re-ink them. The great thing is stamp pads need to be stored upside down. So our Stampin' Up! Ones automatically do that. So you can flip it over and then you click it. When the foam pads get a little bit light on ink, which happens when you use it quite regularly, or if it's been sitting there unused for a while, you just add a few drops here. I'm probably adding more than I need, but because I stamp so regularly, I'm just using our re-inkers and the back of a plastic spoon, and I'm going to rub it in. So when I rub it in, what I'm doing is just applying ink to the top of the surface, and I'm kind of smooshing it down, and it actually will be absorbed very quickly, and you can use it right away. I would end up rinsing that off. I would store it like this for maybe another minute or two, flip it over, store it again for another maybe a minute or two, and then I believe that it's really good to use it then. Okay, so thanks.